So, Relic'd guitars. One of the most controversial subjects in all of guitardom, right up there with the tone wood debate. Some people love them, a lot of people really, really hate them, and despite the fact that this subject has been talked about to death, I still want to weigh in on this topic for a couple reasons. First of all, I'm going to come right out and say, I think it's dumb to hate Relic'd guitars. Now, to be clear, I'm not trying to call anyone stupid for having a particular preference one way or another. It's fine if Relic'd guitars just aren't your thing, but I think the most common criticisms of Relic'd guitars are dumb. So, if you're one of those people who really, really hates Relic'd guitars, then please stick around because I'm going to try once and for all to explain to you why someone might like Relic'd guitars. On the flip side though, the other reason why I want to make this video is when people defend Relic'd guitars, in my opinion, they often miss or don't clearly concisely state what I believe is the main point of them, why people really truly want their guitars to look beat up. Before we get controversial though, really quickly, I just wanted to remind you guys that my standard tuning slide course is currently having a Black Friday sale for 47% off through Cyber Monday. I'm not going to do my whole spiel on the course. If you want to learn more about it, then go to the link in the description of this video down below. But I did want to say thank you so much to everyone who has purchased the course so far. As of right now, I have over 650 active, satisfied learners. I've gotten so many comments and messages from people saying how much they're enjoying the course and how much their standard tuning slide playing has improved because of it, which just means the world to me. I could not be more stoked about that. So one more time, thank you so much to everyone who has purchased the course and anyone who decides to go check it out from this video. So if you clicked on this video and you've made it this far, then I'm sure you know what a Relic'd guitar is, but just in case you don't, a Relic'd guitar is a guitar that is new, that at the factory where it was made has been made to look old and beat up. The main two things that naysayers say about Relic'd guitars are, first of all, it's stupid to pay more money for a guitar that looks beat up from the factory. Now, on the surface, I get it. For any other product on earth, especially ones that are in the price range of some Relic'd guitars, it would be insane to consider paying more money for one that looks beat up. What those people are missing, though, is that it is not easy and takes a lot of work to make a guitar look aged in a convincing, tasteful way. Anybody can take a shiny guitar and throw some rocks or a screwdriver at it and put some dings in it, right? But what everyone can't do is finish sand and buff the finish in a way that looks still shiny but a little bit aged and patinaed. They can't carefully, meticulously add finish checking or tiny cracks that naturally form in the lacquer of nitrocellulose finished guitars. And not everyone can add subtle dings, scratches, and wear marks in places that make sense and are convincing enough to look like a real aged guitar. There truly, truly is a skill and an art to doing it right. And that's why guitar companies like Novo, Mule, and even now Gibson and Fender and so on, have people whose sole job is to do this work. There is literally just as much, if not more, work involved to make a brand new guitar look beat up convincingly than there is to make a brand new guitar look brand new. If you don't believe me, then try it for yourself, and then you'll realize how difficult it really is to relic a guitar tastefully. We've all seen those horrible relic jobs where it looks like someone just took a Dremel to a maple fretboard and took some 100 grit sandpaper to the finish and hit it with a screwdriver a few times and called it a day. It's really hard to do it right, which is why some companies charge more for their relic guitars. Whether you like it or not, it just is a lot of work. So that's great and all, but that's not really getting down to the point of why someone would want a Relic'd guitar. The other main criticism that I always hear from relic haters is that anyone who owns a relic guitar essentially is trying to trick everyone into thinking that they themselves have owned whatever guitar for years and years and gigged it and just played the crap out of it so much that they themselves have naturally aged it. So there's this feeling that you have to like earn your dings and scratches and stuff on your guitar, and that you're basically a poser if you buy a guitar that looks like that from the factory brand new. And that right there is what I think is the biggest misunderstanding from the anti-relic crowd. And I think those people are missing what the real true point of Relic'd guitars is. What people need to understand and what it all comes down to is people like vintage guitars. That's the thing that the haters always miss. Whether vintage guitars are actually better or if they have some kind of special magical mojo is beside the point. The fact is, people like the way vintage guitars look and feel. In other words, some people like the experience of playing an old guitar that is already beat up and aged and worn in by the time the person first comes across it. But the problem is, as we all know, vintage guitars, especially ones from the legendary brands like Fender and Gibson and so on, are extremely, extremely expensive. Again, whether or not they should be that expensive is beside the point. The fact is, vintage guitars, real vintage Fenders, Gibsons, and the like, are out of reach for the vast majority of guitar players. But what if someone's ultimate holy grail dream guitar is that old beat up 1960 Telecaster or 59 Les Paul that they saw in a vintage guitar store? Well, what they can do is buy a new but Relic'd version of that guitar to give them the look and feel of the original thing without having to spend 5 or 6 figures on it. Hey everyone, Future Dylan here. So I'm editing this video right now and I just got to the point of the video that you all just watched. And I can see the comments now. But Dylan, Gibson and Fender custom shop guitars are also out of reach for most people. And some Murphy Lab Gibsons are 5 figures. And to that, I'll say, you're right. Custom shop guitars are very, very expensive and out of reach for a lot of guitar players. And even as someone who owns a custom shop Gibson, not a Relic'd one, but it is custom shop, I think Gibson especially is guilty of charging way, way too much for their aged guitars. The work they do at the Murphy Lab is incredible, and it truly is on another level of detail and accuracy to real vintage guitars. And you could argue that, well, a real 59 Les Paul is well into 6 figures, so you're kind of getting a good deal on a near perfectly accurate replica of a 59 or whatever Les Paul. But I still think it's a bit excessive, personally. There are companies out there that make Gibson-inspired guitars with relic finishes for much more affordable prices, like Eastwood Guitars and Vintage Guitars, the brand Vintage Guitars. And when it comes to Fender, first of all, within their own entire line of guitars, they do have relic guitars for nearly every budget. They have the Made in Mexico Road Worn series for the more budget-friendly. They have the Jason Isbell Telly and the Mike McCready Strat for the kind of more mid-range. And then, of course, you have your custom shop stuff. But Fender themselves does have affordable versions of vintage Relic'd guitars. And when it comes to Fender-style guitars, there are tons and tons of boutique makers and smaller brands that sort of cover that same ground within the sort of Relic'd Fender-style guitar thing. So unless you're trying to get a guitar that says Gibson on the headstock that was Relic'd at the factory, it really is within reach for most people to be able to get a vintage-style Relic'd guitar. And that is the point of Relic'd guitars. They allow people to have the experience of buying and owning a vintage guitar that has the vibe, that already is old, already is aged and beat up, without having to spend real vintage guitar prices. It's not about trying to convince someone that you beat up this guitar by playing the hell out of it for years. Whether you like it or not, people are inspired by playing vintage guitars. They do have a certain vibe about them. They do have a certain specific feel and sound. If that's not your thing, then that's perfectly fine. But don't hate on people who like guitars that are pre-worn in before they get them. So by now, some of you may be saying, well, okay, that makes sense for a Telecaster or a Strat or a Les Paul, any guitar that actually could be an old vintage guitar. But what about guitars that are modern designs that aren't replicating any one specific vintage guitar? Why would you want something like that to be Relic'd also? Well, to that I say, when it comes to modern companies who are amazing at what they do, like Novo and Mule, it doesn't matter. The same thing still applies. The Novo, while it has obvious inspirations from certain vintage guitars, is very much its own unique design, and the Mulecaster, pretty much the only thing this has in common with the traditional Telecaster is the body shape and maybe the bridge style. In literally every other way, from construction to feel to sound, this is nothing like a Telecaster, so this still counts if you ask me. So even though neither of these are replicating any vintage guitar, the fact that they are aged absolutely 100% adds to the experience of playing them. These guitars are the opposite of sterile. They feel like they have music in them, they feel like they have stories in them, and they are just simply extremely inspiring to play the second you pick them up. Both of these guitars are the types of guitars where when you see it from across the room, it immediately has a certain aura, a certain vibe, a certain coolness that just makes you want to go pick it up and play it. And they would not evoke that same feeling in that same way if they were shiny and brand new looking. Even if the oldness of these guitars is just an illusion, there is still value in the look and feel and vibe of these guitars. All of that being said, I'm not trying to put down people who like or even prefer shiny, brand new looking guitars like this, for example. This is a core model PRS McCarty 594 single cut that PRS recently loaned me, and it is just a loaner. They didn't give this to me to keep. I'm just trying it out for a little while and gonna use it in some videos. But anyway, this thing is the epitome of a brand new, shiny, just absolutely spotless finish guitar. And I still love it. I think this thing is beautiful and, in my opinion, has a vibe. Even as someone who loves vintage and Relic'd guitars, this thing is still cool and there's still something satisfying about that ultra precise, ultra clean, shiny look. And so, like I said, there's nothing wrong with preferring this. It's totally okay. It's just, for the people who do prefer this kind of thing, just try to understand the other side a little bit, because there is real value in Relic'd finishes. So regardless of which side of this debate or any other debates you're on, just everyone try to get along, try to understand each other, and the world will be a much better place for it. That does it for today's video. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on Relic'd guitars, and keep it civil, please. Don't forget that my standard tuning slide course is having a Black Friday sale for 47% off through Cyber Monday, so go check that out in the link in the description of this video. If you could please like, comment, subscribe, and click the bell notification icon to get notified whenever I post new videos. It really does help out my channel a lot. Thank you so much for watching, and see you next time.